People don't respect what you say. They respect what you consistently demonstrate. Boundaries are not aggression. They are silent signals of self-worth. Confidence is not loudness. It is emotional control under pressure. The way you speak determines whether people listen or ignore you. Respect is not demanded. It is unconsciously earned through behavior patterns. You walk into a room and something happens before you even say a word. People are already deciding your value, your strength, your presence. Not because they are judging you consciously, but because human psychology is always scanning for signals: strength, clarity, certainty, and control. And here is the truth most people never hear. Respect is not something you ask for. It is something you radiate. Right now, most people are losing respect without even realizing it. Not because they are weak, but because they are inconsistent. They say one thing and do another. They hesitate when they should stand firm. They explain too much when silence would have been more powerful. And slowly, without noticing, their presence becomes background noise in a world that only responds to clarity. But psychology reveals something powerful. Respect is programmable. It is built through patterns that the brain instantly recognizes. When you control your emotions under pressure, when you speak with calm certainty instead of emotional chaos, when you hold boundaries without guilt, people don't just hear you, they feel you. And when people feel stability in you, they naturally assign you authority. Because in the end, respect is not about dominance. It is about signal strength. And once you understand these psychological secrets, you stop chasing respect and you start becoming the person people can't ignore. People don't form respect through isolated words. They don't build it from promises, speeches, or momentary displays of confidence. Psychology is far more disciplined than that. The human brain is constantly observing patterns, not moments. It is asking a silent question in every interaction. Is this consistent or is this temporary? And the answer to that question determines everything about how much respect you receive. You can say all the right things, use powerful language, even speak with confidence in the moment. But if your behavior doesn't align with your words over time, the brain flags you as unreliable. And unreliability is the fastest way to lose authority in any environment. This is not emotional, it is neurological. People are wired to trust patterns because patterns predict safety. And respect is built on the perception of reliability under different conditions, not performance under ideal conditions. Think about it. The person who promises big but disappears when things get difficult never earns deep respect. But the person who stays consistent, even when it is inconvenient, even when no one is watching, even when there is no applause, starts to develop something far more powerful than verbal influence. They develop psychological weight. Their presence starts to carry evidence. And evidence is what the human mind respects. Consistency also creates identity in the eyes of others. When your actions repeat a certain standard, people stop evaluating you each time you speak. They begin to anticipate your behavior. and anticipation creates trust. Trust is the foundation of respect, because the brain does not respect what it cannot predict. When someone knows how you will behave under pressure, they subconsciously assign you a role: leader, dependable one, stable force, or in contrast, uncertain and unstable presence. Most people underestimate how quickly inconsistency erodes perception. One moment of strength does not override 10 moments of hesitation. One confident statement does not cancel repeated indecision. The mind weighs repetition more heavily than intensity. So even small actions, when repeated, become louder than any speech ever could. This is why true influence is never about convincing people in isolated moments. It is about becoming undeniable through repetition. It is about showing up the same way when you are tired, when you are challenged, when you are misunderstood. Because in those moments, character is not spoken, it is displayed. And people don't remember what you claimed in comfort. They remember what you demonstrated under pressure. And over time, that demonstration becomes the standard by which they measure everything you do. Boundaries are often misunderstood as distance, rejection, or even arrogance. But psychologically, they are none of those things. A boundary is simply a clear signal of where your standards begin and where compromise ends. And the human mind, whether it admits it or not, deeply respects people who are clear about their limits. Because clarity creates structure, and structure creates psychological safety. When someone knows what is acceptable and what is not, interaction with them becomes predictable, and predictability builds trust. Most people lose respect not because they lack talent or intelligence, but because they blur their own boundaries in real time. They agree when they want to say no. They tolerate behavior that silently violates their values. They stay silent when they should express discomfort. And every time this happens, something subtle shifts in perception. Others begin to unconsciously register that their limits are flexible, negotiable, or unclear. And once that signal is established, respect begins to weaken, because the brain always interprets flexibility without clarity as weakness of self-definition. In psychology, self-worth is not just an internal feeling, it is an external communication. People don't simply believe what you say about yourself, they believe what you repeatedly allow. If you allow disrespect without response, the mind of others adjusts to that allowance as your baseline. If you tolerate inconsistency in treatment, others unconsciously downgrade the level of regard they give you, not out of intentional disrespect, but because human behavior naturally adjusts to what is permitted. Strong boundaries do not require aggression. In fact, the most respected individuals rarely raise their voice or over-explain their limits. They simply make their position known once, clearly and calmly, and then remain consistent with it. That consistency is where psychological authority is formed. It communicates that your standards are not emotional reactions, but stable principles. And stability in a person creates a sense of reliability. And reliability is one of the highest triggers of respect in social cognition. When boundaries are present, relationships become more defined. People know how to engage with you, what behavior strengthens connection, and what behavior creates distance. This removes confusion, and confusion is one of the fastest ways respect dissolves. Because when people cannot predict your response, they stop anchoring value to your presence. But when your limits are clear, they begin to adjust their behavior accordingly, not out of fear, but out of recognition of structure. The paradox is simple but powerful. The more clearly you define where others cannot cross, the more naturally they understand where they are welcome. And in that clarity, your presence gains weight, not through force, but through psychological certainty that quietly shapes how others respond to you in every interaction. Confidence is often mistaken for volume, speed, or dominance in expression. But psychologically, it has very little to do with how loud a person is, and everything to do with how steady they remain internally when pressure increases. Real confidence is not the absence of stress. It is the ability to regulate it. It is emotional control when the situation is designed to destabilize you, and people are constantly, even unconsciously, observing this quality in others because it signals safety, leadership, and reliability. The human brain is highly sensitive to emotional leakage. When someone speaks, but their tone fluctuates with anxiety, when their eyes search for approval mid-sentence, when their responses feel rushed or defensive, the observer registers instability. And instability reduces perceived authority instantly. On the other hand, when a person maintains calm packing, measured tone, and steady presence, even during disagreement or uncertainty, the brain interprets that as internal control. And internal control is one of the strongest psychological triggers of respect. True confidence is not built in moments of comfort. It is revealed in moments of discomfort. When someone interrupts you, when you are questioned, when you are misunderstood, when pressure rises unexpectedly, the mind is tested. Most people unconsciously react to these triggers with emotional escalation, defensiveness, or over-explanation. But emotionally controlled individuals do something different. They pause. They breathe into the moment. They do not rush to fill silence. And that pause communicates more authority than any argument could. This is because the nervous system of others is constantly mirroring what it observes. If you are reactive, they feel tension. If you are calm, they feel grounded. If you are uncertain, they feel instability. But if you remain steady, they subconsciously align with that steadiness. This is not persuasion through words. It is influence through state. And state always overrides content. Confidence also reshapes communication efficiency. A confident person does not over-explain. They do not multiply sentences to justify a simple point. They trust that clarity is enough. And this restraint creates psychological weight. Because when someone speaks less, but means more, every word begins to carry higher value. Excess explanation, on the other hand, signals internal doubt. It communicates that the speaker is trying to convince themselves as much as the listener. Emotionally controlled confidence also protects respect during conflict. Anyone can appear strong when things are easy, but respect is formed when disagreement enters the room. If a person can maintain calm tone, structured thinking, and non-reactive presence while being challenged, the perception of strength solidifies rapidly. People may not agree with the position, but they cannot ignore the stability behind it. Over time, this control becomes identity. The world stops testing you in the same way because it learns there is no emotional reward in destabilizing you. And interaction shifts around that quiet psychological certainty that forms without announcement. The way a person speaks is one of the most immediate and powerful indicators of their internal state. And psychology confirms that humans form judgments about authority, competence, and respect within seconds of hearing someone's voice. It is not only what is said that matters, but how it is delivered, because the brain processes tone, packing, and certainty faster than it processes meaning. Before logic even engages, perception has already formed. When speech is rushed, unstable, or filled with unnecessary fillers, it creates a signal of uncertainty. The listener may not consciously analyze it, but subconsciously, they begin to assign lower authority to the speaker. Rapid speech often communicates anxiety or a desire for approval, as if the speaker is trying to escape silence or fill space to avoid being challenged. This reduces psychological weight because respect is strongly tied to perceived control, and control is reflected in packing. On the other hand, measured speech creates presence. When someone speaks slowly enough to be understood, but not so slow that it feels forced, they project internal stability. Controlled packing communicates that the speaker is not reacting to pressure, but operating from intention. This is crucial because the human brain equates control with competence. If someone appears in control of their speech, they are also assumed to be more in control of their thoughts. Tone carries even deeper influence than words. A calm, steady tone signals emotional grounding, while a fluctuating or defensive tone signals internal instability. Even a correct message loses impact if delivered with insecurity in the voice. Conversely, even a simple statement gains authority when spoken with calm certainty. This is why some people can say very little and still command attention, while others speak at length and are quickly ignored. Clarity is another essential component. People who speak in unclear or overly complicated ways often lose respect because confusion creates mental effort for the listener. The brain prefers efficiency, and when communication requires too much decoding, attention naturally drops. Clear, direct language reduces cognitive load and creates a sense of intelligence and control. It signals that the speaker is not hiding behind complexity, but confident enough to be understood plainly. Silence, often overlooked, is also part of speech psychology. Strategic pauses create emphasis and allow words to settle in the listener's mind. A person who is not afraid of silence appears more grounded than someone who fills every gap with sound. Silence communicates confidence without needing explanation, because because it shows comfort with attention rather than fear of it. Over time, speech patterns become identity markers. People begin to associate a certain tone, rhythm, and clarity with a person's presence. And once that association is formed, it becomes self-reinforcing. The way you speak stops being just communication and becomes a psychological signature that shapes how others respond to you before they even evaluate your message. Respect is often misunderstood as something that is directly requested, demanded, or negotiated through effort in the moment. But psychologically, it works in a completely different way. Human beings do not consciously calculate respect in real time. Instead, they build it through repeated unconscious assessments of behavior, consistency, emotional control, and predictability. The mind is constantly observing patterns and forming judgments based on accumulated evidence, not isolated actions. This is why respect is never the result of a single powerful moment, but the outcome of repeated behavioral signals over time. When people try to demand respect verbally, it often has the opposite effect because demand implies insecurity. The brain interprets insistence as a lack of natural authority. Real authority does not need to announce itself. It is recognized through presence and behavior. When someone feels the need to constantly assert that they deserve respect, it signals that respect is not already being received, which weakens their psychological position. True respect emerges when behavior aligns so consistently with stability and self-assurance that others reach the conclusion without being told. Behavioral patterns are what shape perception. If a person repeatedly shows discipline, emotional control, reliability, and clear boundaries, the brain of others begins to categorize them as stable and high value. If the opposite occurs, inconsistency, emotional reactivity, unclear communication, or lack of follow-through, then the brain categorizes them as unpredictable or low reliability. These categories form quickly and are reinforced over time. Once formed, they are difficult to override because the brain prioritizes long-term patterns over short-term impressions. Unconscious evaluation plays a major role in this process. People are not actively thinking, "Do I respect this person?" Instead, their mind is scanning microsignals, such as how someone reacts under pressure, how they handle disagreement, whether they maintain composure, and whether their actions match their words. These signals accumulate silently and shape the final perception of respect. This is why individuals can sometimes be respected without saying much at all, while others lose respect despite strong verbal communication. Respect is also deeply linked to emotional stability. When a person consistently responds rather than reacts, when they maintain composure during tension, and when they avoid unnecessary emotional escalation, the brain registers them as psychologically strong. This strength is not about dominance, but about control. And control is one of the most reliable triggers for respect across all social environments. Over time, these repeated behaviors create a reputation, And reputation is essentially a condensed version of all past interactions stored in the perception of others. Once a reputation is formed, it begins to influence future interactions automatically. People approach, respond, and behave based on that established image rather than the current moment alone. This is why respect feels like something that either exists or doesn't, even though it is actually being continuously constructed through small, repeated actions that shape how others interpret your entire presence.